Interdimensional War by Dagaan Galakticos. Chapter 3. You really are a witch to make me do this, Yvonne. I woke up before you yesterday and watched you sleeping. You look like a porcelain doll. Okay, a deal's a deal. Here goes. And remember, you promised, no spelling corrections. Journal entry. November 4th, 2004, 7:26 a.m. Oh my God, my right brain is wiggling. It tickles. It's doing the hoochie coochie or something. I remember that the 1st of November, All Saints' Day, was a Monday. I was in a rush to get to the job for the buck-toothed, cross-eyed, anal-retentive, obsessive-compulsive, homophobic, yuppie lawyer where my crew of 3 noble working-class heroes were waiting for me. Before going to the site, I had to pick up Spence because Lena had their truck, so I was in a hurry. We were in the last stages of putting the frame down on a footer for the stucco wall around the palace of the sainted lawyer, while Emilion and his crew were about to begin slathering on stucco. I'd driven halfway down the block from my house when I realized I'd need my 100-foot extension cord and went back to get it. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Neutron chasing my neighbor's cat, Precious, across the front yard. The cat jumped up into the tree in the front of my house and climbed out on a branch and dropped onto my roof. Then I knew I'd have to haul out the ladder and get Precious down, or my next-door neighbor, the fierce old Senora Lucia, would get hotted up, call the dog police, and then I'd have to tie Neutron up for a week until things cooled down. And I hate doing that because you know how he can lie there at the end of his chain with his head in his paws, groaning and sighing. Senora Lucia, who was just 5 feet tall, once got in an argument with the manager of the Walmart about the return of some item. He kept pointing at her with his index finger, and she kept telling him not to point at her until she grabbed his finger and dislocated it. She's no one to mess with. So I climbed up on the roof, grabbed Precious, and was getting back on the ladder to go down when the cat squirmed in my grip, slashed my face, and jumped into the tree. I reached for it but lost my balance. The ladder skidded off to the right, and then wham! I hit my head on the flag walk and floated up in the air over the house. I could see my body lying there on the ground, and I could see the cat was running back to Lucia's house with Neutron happily chasing it right in front of Lucia's big bay window. I felt totally normal. It was like looking through barbecue fumes, but otherwise it was real. I was up over the roof, and looking down, I could see this patch where I'd fixed the roof last month, and I glided over to check on it. It was well done. So then I remembered I was in a hurry to get to work and floated down towards my body. I don't know what I was planning to do, knock on my forehead and say, "Can I come in?" But all of a sudden I was sitting up and feeling really weird. I looked around in a daze and then threw up my breakfast burrito into my lap. I could see bits of green pepper and onions. I hadn't chewed the tortilla very well. You said to put details in it, Yvonne. I felt a lump growing in my head and saw a little blood on my hand. I was feeling nauseous. I called Neutron and went indoors. I put on sweatpants and lay down on the couch. Later, I went to the job. And that's how it started, Yvonne. And Yvonne, I was going to ask you, does an Angora sweater, tickle? Journal entry, November 6th, 2004. Okay, so that night, Monday, I was lying in bed and thinking about sex and wondering what it was like, Vani, when I started drifting to sleep and thought about the feeling I'd had when I'd been floating over my body, lying on the flagstones. I'd felt like I'd swooped up out of my actual body like a slow swarm of buzzing bees. As I concentrated on remembering that feeling, there was a kind of jerk, a pop, and then I was floating up over my bed. The lights were off in the house, but I could see whatever I wanted to. When I focused on something like the biplane on my bureau or the mirror on the wall, I could see them without turning around to do so. It was weird. I was particularly curious about my own body, which I could see plainly there on the bed with its eyes closed and breathing. The body looked like a sick caricature of me. I looked like a Walt Disney pirate, lantern jaw, hollow cheekbones like an old English peasant, cadaver-like straight hair, and amazingly long toes sticking out from under the covers. It all looked animalistic, thick, and corpse-like. Does that confirm anything for you, why? It made me feel a little sick to think that that's what I looked like. It wasn't the features, the long, noble Polish nose, deep-set, uncannily perceptive hazel eyes, the rich, dark complexion, the high, intelligent brow and handsomely squared chin. It wasn't the rich, floppy brown hair, the whipcord physique, the long silhouette of my crotch under the sheet. That's not what I noticed, Vonnie. It was the density of the skin and the sense of this dark animal breathing there in my bed. It was like seeing my face on the body of an orangutan. Really gross. I looked around the room, at the 2 maple bureaus in the corner, the Spitfire hanging from the ceiling, the aquarium on the bureau with its green nightlight glowing in the water, the corals and the sleeping fish. I looked out the windows at the backyard. There was moonlight on the rock garden. I felt an itch on my leg and scratched it. This woke me up and I found myself scratching my leg in bed. Journal entry, November 7th, 2004. I felt perfectly normal the next morning and went to work. Sometime during the morning, I was loading up scraps when I felt really dizzy and sat down on the ground. I closed my eyes and floated up over the lawyer's house and saw the whole property and the neighborhood houses. Then I blinked and was back inside my own body again. After a while, I felt okay and went back to work. We had the radio on, and I heard Bush making a speech in that dark, menacing voice of his, as though we are all his enemies. That night, curious as hell if I could get consciously out and have an OBE again, I concentrated on the buzzing bees feeling and swooped up out of my body. I tried to see where I was, but everything was hazy and vague, and I wondered if I was just sleeping. But then my sight became clear, and I discovered I was standing in Lena's garden under the big boulder with the hump of quartz on it. As I stood there, I felt an intense shock, like an electrical shock. Everything became intensely focused for a second. The garden, the big boulder, the stars in the sky, and then I woke up in bed. That night I dreamed thousands of pterodactyl birds were flying in black waves over the land coming from the west. I woke with this sick feeling of intense danger. Journal entry, November 8th, 2004. The next night, as I was drifting into sleep, I thought about it. I mean, having an OBE. Really, Yvonne, control your mind. The buzzing bees started up. There was the swooping feeling and a pop or two, and then I was standing next to my bed. I could feel the texture of the rag rug under my feet. I walked into the kitchen and then went to the living room and looked out the living room window at the streetlights shining on the parked cars. I walked through the house. A funny thing happened when I tried to open the back door. I wanted to go out to the backyard to see if Neutron could see me. When I tried to grab the doorknob, my hand went right through the door. So I just walked through the door like it was a hologram. It's like I'm in a dream, but I know I'm dreaming. Oh, a dream door, and I just move on through the dream. Neutron was lying there, half out of his little doghouse. I petted him, but he couldn't see me or hear me or anything. A glass I'd left by the pallet of adobe bricks reflected the thin moonlight. I couldn't tell at first just what was magnifying the light and was curious. Before I'd even decided I wanted to go over there, I was right next to a glass of water that I'd left out a couple of evenings ago. I looked at the sparkle of light and sort of automatically looked up at the moon, which was causing it. As I did this, I started flying or floating fast up into the sky. I looked back at the house, getting smaller and smaller, and felt a wave of fear, because I thought I was about to shoot off into space. There was a jolt, and the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes in bed. The sudden shift was strange. 1 minute I was accelerating through the night sky, and the next I was sitting up in bed. There was a kind of hiss I could hear or feel, or maybe it was just the intensity of the sudden total silence. Journal entry, November 9th, 2004. I was heading for the moon, flying naked through the air. Ivan, you should have seen me. I guess I was naked because my body in bed had the sweatpants on. It was a fascinating feeling. The entire Western Hemisphere looking up and seeing my skinny white ass flying to the moon. While I was working that day, I'd remembered flying towards the moon the night before and wondered if I could actually get there. So that night, as I was going to sleep, when I got to the right point of relaxation and awareness, it's a kind of fuel-air mixture. When the proportions are right, I start to feel the buzzing bees, and I can just swoop up and out of my body. So I did that and walked through the bedroom wall into the backyard. I looked up at the moon and whoosh, I was on my way. And then there I was, standing on the moon, looking at the earth, and it looked just like the pictures, except for the barbecue fumes that are like optical distortions. I walked around a bit. It was like walking on baby powder. But there are dark, rich colors instead of just gray. I seemed to be wearing an opaque kind of robe. I looked for footprints and space junk, but I didn't see any. When there was nothing more I wanted to do, I looked at the earth down there and picked a spot that was in the sunshine and sort of aimed myself at it like a slingshot. I think I'd picked India. I pushed off and landed on a hillside overlooking rice paddies or lagoons. It was daytime. The sun was shining. It was like a hazy dream. Then I felt I was about to sneeze. And then on the chew, I woke up in bed sneezing. November 13, 2004. Okay, the next time was on Thursday the 11th, but I also went out again last night, but I'll put them down in order. I buzzed, swooped up and out, and then immediately was flying over Santa Fe. Below me was a blur of street lights and car lights. I was pulled to a car parked on a dark side street. There was a guy, a teenager, Hispanic, standing next to the car. Inside the car was another guy who had been shot and was dead. The guy outside the car wanted to get into the car, but he couldn't, and he was confused and scared. I realized this guy trying to get in the car was the spirit of the guy who was dead in the car. He was kind of stuck. He didn't know what to do next, and he couldn't go back into his body. He saw me and said, "Yo, dog, help me get this door open. My hands be slipping." He was near panic and trying to act cool. He couldn't get a hold of the handle. I was paralyzed for a moment, realizing this guy could see me and that I could hear him, that he could talk when he was like that, a spirit next to his own dead body. He became aware that our looking at each other was weird, different, and he got distracted from trying to get a hold of the door handle. Then we both started floating upwards, and a feeling of mixed sadness and wonder was shared between us. At some point he vanished, and I woke up in bed. The feeling of sharing his death was really strong, and I stayed awake a long time thinking about him and where he'd gone. November 17th, 2004. Yesterday morning, I was loading up the truck to go to work. I saw this beautiful woman come out the front door of Lucia's house. She had shoulder-length black hair and was muy guapa. She was Hispanic and had the classic kind of Indian Spanish beauty you see in old National Geographic pictures of South America. Full, high cheekbones, wide, luxurious mouth, the full figure and teased-up, oiled hair, and though she was just wearing jeans and a white blouse and not some exotically colorful dress, I felt when our eyes met that I was looking into the eyes of the Indian soul. A little charge of attraction passed between us, and then we both looked away. Almost immediately, Yvonne, I swear. She took off in a huge old maroon Impala with skinny low-rider wheels, and I drove off in my truck. That night, I got the fuel-air mixture right and felt the buzzing. I swooped up and out, and I saw that same woman from the morning standing at the foot of my bed. I said, "I saw you this morning." She said, "Yes, you live next door to my aunt." And before either of us could say another word, we were kissing and holding each other and having sex. It was really beautiful, tender and sweet. I didn't try to make it happen or even think about it when I was going to sleep. When it was over, I woke up in bed and thought about it. Okay, you said to tell the truth and put in the facts. The next day, when I got home from work, I saw the Impala was gone, and I went over and asked Lucia who she was. I wanted to tell that woman I'd dreamed some silly dream about her to see if she had also dreamed about me. The woman was in fact Lucia's niece, who had been spending a few nights, but had now gone back to her husband in Albuquerque. Lucia sort of stressed the husband part and assured me that I assured her that I got the picture. Journal entry, November 22nd, 2004. I went out again last night. I was really tired and just went to sleep after watching a video. I woke up out of body. I flew into this strange house, and the Hispanic woman was there waiting for me at the front door. She was dressed in a heavy floor-length gown, thick as a curtain. I couldn't see any part of her body. She had a deadpan serious face and said, "I am with our nephew." And this clinched it, subject closed. She was not available. I just drifted away and found myself in my garage, feeling kind of rejected. I looked at the model airplanes hanging from the rafters for a while. Then I just woke up in the morning normally. I never noticed when I went back into my body. Journal entry, November 23rd, 2004, 3:12 a.m. The dashboard glow on the instrument panel of the Spitfire was so real. The look of my gloved hands vibrating on the controls was so familiar. A drone like thunder rumbled on below me where clouds hid German bombers. Searchlights streaked through the fog, and blimps and patches of London showed up in the searchlights. The melody of a popular song kept going through my head. "Death, where is thy sting-a-ling-a-ling?" 200 Hurricanes and Spitfires surrounded me as we headed east, descending through the fog over the English Channel onto an oncoming formation of German bombers, flanked by Messerschmitt 109 and 110 fighters headed into London. There they were below me as I broke through the clouds. My machine gun was going all out. I'd strapped across the top of a bomber when a Messerschmitt came up on my right rear. Rounds went into me like warm fingers under my skin, and then I was floating up over the bombers as they went by. My plane fell away into the English Channel, and I woke up 10 minutes ago. This was more than a dream. Every detail was graphically real. The instrument panel, where I remembered banging my head on landing once, was cracked. The picture of a dark-haired girl in a nurse's uniform with a familiar, sarcastically sweet look was so familiar to me. In the dream, I remembered her name, Kelly. As I awoke, I could still feel the cold steel of machine gun handles vibrating in my hands. Journal entry, November 24th, 2004, 1:43 a.m. I was flying over the Cerrillos Avenue drag, where I used to go looking for a date sometimes when I'd first moved to Santa Fe. I was bar hopping, investigating. It was really eerie. Inside the bars, people looked like corpses drinking green, bubbling poison. Their skin was thick and oily, and these big black amoebas or spiders were crawling on the walls and sitting on people's shoulders. I saw this woman in a short, shiny dress backed up against a bar stool playing with the straw of her drink. A man stood in front of her talking. There was this elongated triangle like a broken shard of glass sticking out of her into the man, and globules of crystal light were trickling out of him along the triangle of black glass and into the woman. The whole time she was giggling and he was laughing. There was a dance floor, and people were dancing all tangled up in cobwebs and shooting things into each other. It was very weird, and it made me tired and depressed, and I decided I wanted to go back to sleep. Instantly, I was back in my bedroom. But when I tried to get back into my body, the spiders were floating around my body on the bed, and they would grab me with their slimy tentacles and prevent my going forward. I couldn't get back in my body. I got really scared. As I got more and more scared, these things came closer, touching me with tentacles that burned cold. I became desperate at one point and made a dive up and over them and got back into my body and woke up. When I was awake, I could still see them faintly hovering around the bed in the dark. I got up and turned the lights on and walked around the house until they vanished. Journal entry, November 26th, 2004, 9:12 a.m. The business with the spiders really got to me. I was too nervous to try and get out for a few days, but I had very curious dreams. In one dream, I was standing in a transparent dome on the bottom of the sea. Outside the dome, on the ocean floor, there was tall grass waving in the current and two white Angora buffalo grazing as their long hair drifted with the current. In another dream, I was piloting a UFO. The control panel took up the entire width of the ship behind the windshield, which curved and angled downwards. The ship was huge, as wide as the wings of a 747, and extremely powerful. I was flying along, fairly close to the ground and fairly slow. I could see a wide river below. On either side of it were roads with the high-speed traffic of a modern city. I could see telephone poles and wires and office buildings. The dream was very brief, but so real that I lay thinking about it for a long time after I woke up. The density of the physical ship, the immense power of its engines was so real, I felt sure I really had just been somewhere in another reality. In another dream, I was in a moving elevator, lying on an operating table, and 5 or 6 people in white cloaks stood over me and aimed a kind of X-ray machine into different parts of my body. I wasn't scared, and it felt really good. They were healing me somehow. In another dream, Yvonne was dressed in a peach bikini, snapping her bra straps and dancing at the foot of my bed, saying, "Joe, wake up! Joe, please wake up!" Haha. Just kidding, Vonnie. Journal entry, November 28th, 2004, 7:23 a.m. I finished reading the book Yvonne gave me, Journeys Out of the Body, by Robert Monroe. Incredible. He was having the same experiences as I am, and this was written in the 50s. It's amazing. His experiences are so much like mine. I can't stop reading the book. Yvonne said there are 2 more books of his. I'm going to get them. Journal entry, November 28th, 2004, 2:52 a.m. I can't sleep. I'm feeling depressed. Yvonne and I aren't going to get back together. She's being nice to me because she's a good person, and being nice is what good people do. We're old friends, and I'm a great lover. She told me so once, though maybe she said the same thing to Goldilocks. I'm so sick of getting up and going off to build yet another roof or wall or carport. The world is such a mess. Politicians are just waiters for big business. Mussolini makes his diatribes from the White House, and radio personalities discuss what he said because that's their job. There's so many poor people who work and get nowhere and live in dives. I'm one of the ones that hires them, but I can't pay them any more than my competition. If the top cats gave up 10% of the interest on their billions, the whole of America would be uplifted. I wish I could do something that was actually useful for this world.